ISM, Mr. Heng, Eugene from the Business Times. I just have a question. How do you see RIE 2030 strengthening Singapore's competitiveness in semiconductors and manufacturing, considering some of the geopolitical tensions that we are facing, like the impending semicon tariffs?
Well, that's why we need to put an extra effort in this. Semiconductors is no longer just an economic or a technological issue. It's become a strategic issue, a security matter, and other countries are making big investments or policy decisions, not to foster the market or to advance technology, but because they want to develop self-reliance, they want to reduce their dependence on others, they want to keep ahead of others. So we have to understand this. Nevertheless, even while these changes are taking place, I think there will still be a role for Singapore to be a semiconductor center for the semiconductor industry. We have the companies here, they're operating here, they know us, they're successful. They know that we can deliver, they know that we have the workforce which is disciplined and which has the skills, and they know that we have the stable economic and political environment, and it makes sense for them to be here. But at the same time, one of the things which makes it worthwhile for them to be here is to have that ecosystem, the research and development going on, the labs which can support the whole industry, the scientists and the researchers in the universities whom they can consult with and work with, and find solutions to their problems. And that's where the government's research and R&D efforts can support the industry. And by bringing all the R&D efforts we have for semiconductors together under one flagship project, I think we pull the pieces together better. We make sure that our efforts count for more. And we also, by staking this, putting this up, make it quite clear that we are doing what we need to do in order to help the industry here grow and prosper. Doesn't mean every project will come here, because there will be some projects where the US, for example, or maybe the Europeans, or maybe the Chinese will say, this one I absolutely want, and whether through subsidies, whether through incentives, whether through directives, I will cause it to come to them. And we can't compete against that kind of projects. But there will be other parts of the industry which will not be like that, and they are substantial, and I think in all those areas we will be competitive. And that's what the flagship project is meant to do.
I just want to add that in Singapore is already a significant player today globally. We produce 10% of the chips and 20% of the chip manufacturing equipment. We have outstanding collaborations with companies in research that date back for more than 2 decades. And there's so a strong momentum of both research as well as industry activity in Singapore. We are therefore building on this, and we have a set of research expertise across a whole range of areas that are needed to take this industry further, including in materials, in photonics, and other areas which are very critical for the next inflection points of the electronic industry. So we are building on this momentum and doubling down in order for us to be able to work even more extensively with companies to help our SMEs to become suppliers and to also foster startups that can add to the vibrancy of overall semiconductor ecosystem.
Hui Min, go ahead.
Okay, Hui Min from CNA Digital. So, Mr. Heng, just now you mentioned in your remarks that Singapore's investment is a small fraction of what the whole world invests. I understand that it's 1% of Singapore's GDP for the past 20 or so years. Do you foresee that this amount will increase, this percentage will increase in the future, given Singapore's needs?
Well, actually, we have been able to maintain this over the years, and this increased, for example, for this round. The last round was 28 billion, and this round is 37 billion, partly inflation and partly because of the. But I would say that it is not just the public sector investment. What we are hoping to do is also to get more private sector investments in the overall number, because it's a total number that will make a difference. That's the first point. Second point is that what we must always seek to do is to look at how we can be distinctive, we can add value in the way that we invest these resources, in the way that we work with companies. So to add to what SM and Chorh mentioned earlier on, like in the semiconductor, it is a very long supply chain and with many parts, components, and therefore in the semiconductor area, we have to focus on particular areas which we have very distinctive edge. And our research work in the universities will be able to contribute quite a lot, because we have many discussions with companies about what they need and what the researchers are doing. And we have also set up areas like corporate laboratories to better understand industry's needs, so that whatever our researchers do can be translated into specific products or processes in the companies. So this very symbiotic relationship between our public researchers and the private researchers and companies is a strength. And therefore, what we must seek to do is not just to increase the amount of funding, we have substantial funding, but to use it really well to make an impact.
Just to clarify, actually I meant, is it possible that Singapore will increase its proportion of spending? So now it's 1%, right? Will it go up?
Well, we'll see what happens in the next 5 years. we will look at that.
We're not planning on that now, but neither are we constrained by the 1%.
Yes.
I think the important thing with R&D spending is that it is or R&D investment is that something which you should do on a sustained long-term basis. It's not something where you want a feast and famine, where I have a big budget surplus, I spend more this year, next year I'm tight for money, I cut back my projects. When you launch a research project, whether it's in biomedical, whether it's in semiconductors, whether it's in fundamental physics or quantum, these are projects which last years, programs which last years. And you have to have the confidence when you go into it that you won't spend 3 years and then suddenly the funding is cut and all your work goes down the drain. Sometimes literally, because you've got test tubes or Petri dishes and then you have to turn off the refrigerator or the chiller, and then it's a disaster. And you've seen that happen in other countries. So we've decided we'll keep it stable, about 1%. It's not small, it's not exorbitant, but it is a significant contribution. And roughly within that 1%, we make sure we find projects which are scientifically valuable to do and which some relevance to us, and some proportion will be also broader basic research, but has to be good science and justified, worthwhile to spend. And we do that. We budget that. And we'll go forward. If, in fact, we've got something which deserves much, is so promising that you really want to double down and do a lot more, well, we'll go back and talk to the Ministry of Finance. So far, I think we're okay. So the Ministry of Finance just watches us and makes sure that the money is well spent.
Thank you, SM and Chairman. Next question over here.
Hi, sir. YK from Taobao here. I mean, like, some may comment that many of the ways that we do with R&D, like the way we evaluate talents and projects and also journal publication, are based on the Western systems, especially the US system. I mean, like, is this by any way a disadvantage for us? I mean, like, what else do we need to do to be able to attract talents from all over the world to choose Singapore as the final destination, or as a destination? Is there a need to delink from the US system, Western system, or maybe to move a little more towards the Eastern system?
Well, we would like to attract talent from all over the world. It's one of the key factors in making a success of the R&D program, and is an issue which the Council deliberated extensively amongst themselves, and even this afternoon in my meeting with them. There are many factors in making R&D researchers, good scientists, decide they want to come to a place. First, there must be something useful and significant for them to work on. It must be a place where they can do good work, where they have the resources, where they can assemble a team, where if they want to take it forward beyond the research to the innovation, to the entrepreneur, to the startup and commercialization phase, that ecosystem must be there, and we must be able to provide that. The government support must be there. That's why when we say the RIE, the flagship program on semiconductors or others to come, that means that research is going on. They can fit into that program. It's something where they can do good work. Of course, it also matters that it's a place where it's safe, where their families can come and feel comfortable, where their children have good schools, healthcare system, all the hygiene and personal factors which matter to people who are looking for a place to live and want to make sure that all these things will be okay. And I think those we have. How do we know who are the people who will come? Well, we have to have some understanding of the subjects and of who is publishing what, who is doing what work, and some ability to evaluate what is good work and what is just a piece of paper. In the Western countries, there are some systems they have doing it for doing this. They've got publications, they've got citations, they've got rankings, they've got peer review. It's not perfect. All sorts of problems emerge from time to time. Now you have papers which are fake, written by AI. You have papers which are not just individual ones fake, but whole collections of them referring to one another, and then therefore building up the citation index. So we have to be canny about that and not take that at face value. I don't know that there's an alternative system which is virtuous and superior and we can fall back on. I'm sure the Chinese researchers must have some internal way of knowing who stands where and of assessing each other. And I imagine that when our universities approach them or NRF, we will try and tap into their networks. But I think eventually we have to decide and we have to make our own assessments. Who are the people who have done good work, is useful, be able to make a contribution to Singapore or do further good work in future? That's, I think, even more important. And then if we can find them, then we'll bring them. And sometimes it will work out, sometimes it won't. But if our people are on top of their jobs, I think we will mostly get it right.
I think on the evaluation in science and technology, the parameters by which we assess quality are fairly similar around the world. If you look at mathematics, physics, biology, the parameters we use are fairly similar. The difference is the judgment of what is a real advance and what is just an incremental addition. And that judgment, of course, there are different ways you can try to do that. Looking at peer review is one way. Looking at track record, looking at the plausibility, either from a biological or a physical point of view. So we, like everyone else, use a mixture of approaches by which we would assess the quality of an individual, the quality of their work, and then we make the judgment and we bring in people we think have a high potential to advance that work and to make a contribution which is significant and in some cases can also spark off new work or in fact even start new fields. So the parameters are fairly similar across the world. The judgment and the way by which, the process by which it is implemented, of course, vary, but we try to do our best by using a mixture of different methods to do so.
You must start with people who know the business and who are good, and they will be able to help you identify who are others who are good. In Chinese, they say "xing xing xi xing xing." You must have that spark, then you will recognize it in others and be able to assess others.
Let me just add that I think what Chuan mentioned about in the area of the basic sciences, the parameters of assessment are very similar, and I think it's fairly global. Where I think we need to factor in is in the humanities and social sciences side, there may be a bit of a gap because, for instance, I've met many of our local researchers who felt that if you're measuring purely by citation index, some of them may be disadvantaged because they're focusing on a very specific study of, say, Singapore or just a region, and they don't see, many of these don't get into internationally refereed journals, and which is something which we will look into in the humanities and social sciences side. The other aspect, on back to science and technology, that beyond assessing the publications and so on, I think a big part of this RIE 2030 plan is to look at innovation and enterprise. And there are many other ways of measuring innovation and enterprise. For instance, patent applications. And you can see the changes in the patent applications across many countries. And in Singapore's case, our very good protection of intellectual property is a strength. The rule of law in Singapore is a strength. And that translates into how we can bring more companies to do their startups, how we can get corporates to set up their corporate laboratories in Singapore, working with our researchers. And so let's take a broader look at all these parameters. It's not just about publication and citation alone. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Kevin.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Kevin from The Edge Singapore. I have two questions. The first one is to revisit the
Where?
The Edge Singapore.
The Edge.
Yeah, EDGE.
Okay.
Yeah, just two quick questions. I think one is on the flagship on semiconductors. So there's been increased debate and speculation on whether there's an AI bubble. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on the AI bubble in general and how the flagship would position Singapore with respect and to factoring in that risk. My second question is actually on the space economy and space technology. That was a pretty big focal point of RE 2030. Going in towards RE 2030, I just wanted to hear if there's any specific areas the government is looking to push towards too, and any innovations that you'd like to spotlight that have emerged from the past efforts. Thank you.
I don't know whether there's an AI bubble. Some people say yes, some people say no. The thing with bubbles is that you only know afterwards that there was one, and sometimes even afterwards you were not sure. But whether there's an AI bubble or not, electronics is a very important part of our economy and a very important part of the world economy. You need electronics for all kinds of things. And we are a significant electronics player, producer, semiconductors. And I think that we need to upgrade that, and what we're doing will work towards that. But on space, Chuan, you have something to say?
Yes, we continue to invest in research in space, and there are two broad aspects. One is really imaging, and the other really is as satellites go lower, what's called VLEO, very low Earth orbits, they encounter much harsher conditions. So you need new materials, new sensors, etc. And so this is a kind of thematic area which is more related to materials for harsh environments. And so as you develop materials that are able to be used in outer space, in low orbits, they can also be applicable in some cases to commercial air flights. So that's the two broad areas that we will be developing further as part of the space economy.
Next question.
Okay.
Oh, Kitty. Okay, Siti, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm Siti. I'm from the Japanese news agency Kyodo News. I just have a question on Chairman Heng's speech in the 6th paragraph, when you mentioned that we will have a broader outreach to Asia and beyond, and Singapore seeks to be a global Asian node of technology, innovation, and enterprise. I just wonder whether you can elucidate on this having a broader outreach to Asia and beyond, and about being a global Asian node. Why do you think that Singapore would stand the best chance to play this role? And any new approach would be needed? And what can we expect to see more of on the ground when you want to be a global Asian node in future?
Well, first, let me explain the term global Asian node. It's a term that I've been using for a number of years, because in the early phase of Singapore's industrialization, we attracted the first world countries to come to Singapore, and we learned a lot from the technology transfer, so from America, from Europe, from Japan, and that has really helped us to move up the value chain significantly. And in the last 30 years or so, the rest of Asia, developing Asia, whether it's ASEAN, whether it's China, India, have also been growing. And many business from around the world use Singapore as a base to access these markets. So we are a sort of a nice neutral connector of businesses from Asia and the world. And I use the term node because it doesn't mean that everything goes through Singapore. We are just one of many nodes, but we seek to be a good, trusted node. And in the coming years, I believe science, technology, and innovation will reshape the global economy significantly. And therefore, Singapore's additional role or new role that we need to play in this is to be that node that connects technology, innovation, and enterprise. And I mentioned about the rule of law, the use of IP, and Singapore being a trusted, neutral country. That allows us to bring people together, and that is what I meant. And I think many, many innovative activities are happening around the whole of Asia, whether it's in ASEAN, whether it's in Japan, China, or India. And many of the, for example, VCs are based in Singapore to access all this. So I hope that Singapore can play a useful role in that process. Yeah.
Maybe I can just add a note to what Chairman said, that there are sort of innovations, research in other parts of the world that may be most applicable in Asia. And some of those things could be could take advantage of Singapore to access the region. Conversely, there's a great deal more innovation research now in Asia and Southeast Asia, and some of those could also take advantage of Singapore to access broader networks and collaborators around the world. So in that sense, Singapore could play a role bridging between Asia and the rest of the world.